and welcome, dear lurkers, to the Third Age Babylon 5 podcast. Today, as you can see, it's just the two of us. Meike is not feeling very well, but she will be with us again soon. We are going to discuss the second episode after big changes happen, so the second episode of Season 2, which is called Revelation. In this episode, we get to know our new commander a bit better. We see Sheridan having to take over council meetings, having to deal with the ambassadors. Also, we get a little insight on who he is as a person, how he works as a person, because his sister visits. They talk about his new life, his new tasks, and we also learn more about his past. Then there are other things happening that are not super interconnected at this point, but still pick up things from the past. Jakar is coming back to the stations, that he has bad news, which are difficult to understand at this point. It's all very cryptic. We see another view on how Mr. Martin works with Londo, and of course Garibaldi is waking up, which is interesting and raises a lot of new questions at this point. I think that's it for now.
That's the big things happening, yeah.
Oh, a big thing also, of course, we see Dylan's face revealed.
Yes.
After her big transformation.
This is kind of Dylan's big transformation episode, which is a shame that Meike isn't with us to talk about this a little bit. I think we'll just keep this topic as a side and...
Yeah, we can talk about this. It's just one scene we have here now. I think we can still talk about a lot of aspects of her transformation throughout the next few episodes.
Exactly. And I think also the original plans for transformation and so, which is, just something that becomes more relevant in later episodes anyway. Yes. So I guess we can do first impressions.
First impressions, yes.
Should I start with mine? Because we don't have the newcomer here to take on this role, I guess.
But I'm a fresher newcomer.
Okay, Then take it away.
Yes, because, I was surprised by how mystical and how connected to the later happenings this episode already feels. And I was surprised by the shadow fighters that we saw. Because when I first watched Babylon 5, I remember that this was to the part where I thought, everything that's happening is interesting, but are they going to tie that up into something bigger, something that actually catches me? I wasn't sure yet. So now, knowing what happens, I feel a lot of the sparkling, a lot of the tension from later that really was so interesting for me. Although I think as a first-time viewer, I didn't catch where that was going at this point. Another thing that happened this time that I probably also could have noticed the last time, but only did this time, was the soundtrack in the intro for the season 2. That is really the kind of melody, the kind of music that I connect in my head with Babylon 5. So that really gave a lot of the later atmosphere. In general, yes. Now it's an episode that really catches me and I'm really in the story, but I know that that's only because I know what's going to happen, I think.
I think I can see this. I have to say, this time around, I'm kind of surprised by the momentum this episode still has. Like, all the little elements I knew would happen early on in this season, but I always kind of have in mind that the start of season 2 is still very much episodic, and then just over the course of the season it picks up. But then this episode doesn't really have a kind of self-contained plot, right? It's all just bits and pieces that connect to the larger story, and it all slots together into something that felt very engaging for me to watch, and that might be in large part because you know that all of these things are on track to lead to larger things. And it's going to be interesting. We will be picking Meike's brain about this, how she feels about the beginning of the season not having this kind of background. All right, this also makes it a little bit harder to structure our discussion, I guess, because there isn't really one through line that we can easily follow, but there's like a handful of big chunks of story that happen, and I guess we can kind of just decide character-based, who do we want to start talking about, because a lot of people get something to do in this episode. Do you have like something that jumps out to you?
Oh, something that jumps out to me. No, I don't know where to start.
I mean, in this case, we already mentioned Dylan's transformation, and this is sort of the cliffhanger that the last episode ended on, so maybe let's talk about this a little bit, where essentially we already saw that the cocoon was breaking up, and now after, I think, one small scene of Lanier still sort of tending to her, she gets out of this cocoon relatively quickly, and we see like multiple steps of transformation in rapid succession here. I don't know how well you remember your first time reaction to this and how unspoiled it was, but yeah, we see Delenn has come out of a big prophesized transformation. What do you think about the results of that?
I was surprised the first time because I don't know, I would not have guessed that she comes out part human. That would have not been my guess. I had no idea at that point what to expect. And yeah, I think that I constantly try to wrap my head around is how her hair grows. Like, maybe this is totally superficial, but I see her, what is that called?
The kind of bone crest that they have.
Kind of bone crest that they have, and then I see how the hair grows here on top of her head. And then there's this bone thing, and then it, so I don't know. I mean, probably leaving her head bald and then having the crest and then the hair, that would have looked very funny. So that's probably why they didn't do it. But yeah, so that's a thing that definitely always sticks with me. How does that work? But others than that, yeah, it's definitely a big reveal, and it's definitely also in the last episode, I said that I like to look at the reason why the war between Minbari and humans stopped, because the Minbari really is this big meaningful metaphor, I think, for wars in general. Noticed that the people that they were fighting, they were so close to them. They kind of they had something that they shared and something that they had in common, and it's very hard to kill someone that is so close to you. And here Delenn takes that a step further, and that's yeah, I mean, we can talk about the transformation and the meaning when Meike is there again, but that's also what she says here in the end, to become a bridge between the two people to make war impossible. I feel my old theory kind of is confirmed a bit with that, and that is a beautiful way to comment on something like a war on that scale.
I think the quote that she gives in the end gives me almost a little bit mixed feelings, because on the one hand, it is this very beautiful message of saying, I make myself a symbol and the bridge between our two peoples. At the same time, it feels like a very Delenn thing to do. Like, this ambassador went into a cocoon for weeks and then emerges as a half-human hybrid, and she talks about this almost like it's something that you can just kind of do. I thought about how can I improve our communications, and I thought becoming half-human would be a good measure. It doesn't really explain anything. It's this kind of answer that she just expects everybody to accept at that level, and not gonna give any more explanation to this. Sheridan remarks even on that, which is something we've seen Delenn do multiple times. It's not a criticism of her, it just feels very true to her character. It's just, hello, I'm half-human now, so this is going to help us. But I think it also speaks to the fact that it opens this question, what does this actually mean? Okay, she has hair now, but beyond that, is this like about changing brain chemistry? Does she learn to think more like humans to facilitate better communication? Or like, what are the implications of making this bodily change when she talks about it in terms of like diplomacy? It's going to be very interesting to see.
Totally. Also, I mean, at that point, you also just have to think about where do we stop to find similarities between us? I mean, if you want to go into that topic right now.
We can, sure.
Yeah, because I mean, if I now I now find traces of human DNA in her DNA. Definitely, I see that the change that this machine can do to you is really like this basic. And we have others that are other sci-fi universes where life in general has a common source, so that I can break down the chemicals that make our life possible to the same ones. And that's like, we have so much in common, let's not kill each other. Yeah. And such an explanation you don't have in Babylon 5, but still we are from the same galaxy, we are made of the same basic compounds, all our worlds. So you could go even further and find even more and more and more of what all life in our galaxy at least shares. And I think for me, the big symbolic thing is really that she started this thinking. I mean, by thinking now of what kind of human features does she have? Like, does she have our hormones now? Does she have our brain chemistry now? I can go into this thinking and maybe even then come to the big revelation, oh my god, maybe war is always a bad idea between sentient beings. And she really, sacrificed the integrity and the safety of her own body to become this thought and this question.
And I think what's notable about the presentation here is also that Sheridan and almost everybody outside of her quarters doesn't really know how fundamental of a change this is. Like, even superficially looking at the show, you can see Dylan in season 1 and Dylan in season 2. Oh, she has hair now. That's a neat change. I really appreciate that even though these are only 2 short scenes, we get to see the in-between stage where she was in a cocoon for a very long time. She emerges wrapped in these robes, or like emerges and wraps herself in these robes and doesn't want anybody to look at her. That's extremely... It looks at that first stage almost traumatizing experience where she herself doesn't even know what she is now. And when Lanier finally gets Franklin to get to these quarters and examine her, she's completely encased in these like gray scales. So it very much visually tells us there is a lot more happening than just her growing hair all of a sudden, even though the end result looks that easy. And, you know, if we take this transformation as a kind of metaphor for building bridges between species, it's kind of telling that if you just see the beginning and end result, it feels like a fairly minor and simple thing. She just has hair now. But when you look behind the scenes, it's this like very painful, very involved and fundamental process that she has to go through that you can only really appreciate if you've gone through these steps. And I think this is just, if anything, foreshadowing that this task that she sets herself is going to be a difficult one, and the results might not look as impressive as they really are.
Yes.
I think this is more or less all we can learn from this, or anything more.
That's basically everything. I mean, I would also like to mention that the episode starts with Londo complaining about the council not being really able to make any decisions because, you know, Jakar is missing and someone tries to become a butterfly, or what he says. So that comment was worth everything.
It's really to be appreciated that they get a lot of leeway out of the whole butterfly thing. Also, when they call Jack, hey, you have got to see this, Dylan is back and she has wings now. I just like that there is, beyond the big, you know, diplomacy and world-changing implications of this transformation, it's also acknowledged as a very weird thing that happened, a very strange alien biology thing that happened that everybody has kind of having a little bit of fun with, which it's just adds a little light-hearted note into an episode where a lot of the things that happen are otherwise fairly deep, dark, and grim, and not so fun.
Yes. So maybe let's continue with the things that are not so fun. Let's talk about the whole Londo Jakar returning situation.
Yeah. I mean, first of all, we learn what Jakar has been up to. He has been tracking around the frontier on his own, or rather with a bunch of other non-fighters that he has at his disposal. I mean, he is a high-ranking member of his species, but he's been getting in full-on Sinclair style into the cockpit himself and has been traveling a bunch of dead worlds. And I mean, I have to say, the way he describes it, it feels like he is going across Gondor into Mordor and finding out that Sauron has returned to Barad-dûr. It's very much this mystical quest that he goes on with a very brutal end. Also, he encounters like dangerous creatures over a dead world, and everybody of his companions sacrifices themselves for him to get a chance to get away. And as soon as he returns, he starts talking about how this is what was prophesied in the holy texts, and worlds that were 1,000 years old are falling to the old enemy yet again. It all feels very much like straight out of Tolkien's Legendarium.
Yes, and also that seems so serious and surreal to him that he actually does not care about the old conflicts anymore, that he actually lets Londo in at this, that he tells him about it, and also doesn't give that much attention anymore to the conflict that they had going on until then. That was very determining and really a big part of his identity, and all of that doesn't matter anymore after what he believes he has learned at this point. So that's definitely, worrisome.
It is worrisome and already like a very big change from season 1, right? In season 1, we remarked kind of that he has this political side and on a personal level, this awareness for how big the universe is. And now it's these two sides of him are colliding, and he's trying to tell everyone in the council, no, these big things, the ancient enemies of the universe, are what we should be focused on right now, at a time where the council is as dysfunctional as it ever was. And Sheridan very much sits in the middle of this and gets a headache, I imagine.
Yes, but also I find it interesting at this point that you just don't expect some a kind of ancient truth, a kind of deep knowledge of the universe or of the galaxy from someone like Jakar. If Dylan had come back with such news, I think everyone would have listened a little more closely. That's interesting for me to see here.
And I would extend this even to the point of saying I wouldn't expect this from the Narn in general. And for how difficult it is for Jakar to convince anybody of what is happening, it's clear that he has at least enough influence with the Narn regime to get a substantial backing for this. He got the ships for his own little expedition, and he convinced the Circle of Narn to send a well-armed warship to Zahadum, to this like pivotal main world that he has identified as the source of all evil, to investigate that, even though they are not fully convinced they might find anything. So clearly he is calling in all favors that he has to get there a serious investigation going, and the Narn regime is willing to do that, even though so far we've only really seen them as a super militaristic expanding force.
Yes. An interesting moment there, I thought, was when he reports to the council that the ship that they sent had been destroyed. And he realizes that it could only have happened in the first moment when they came out of hyperspace, so that someone must have known that the ship was coming. And then he looks at Londo, and he just doesn't even dare to imply that Londo had done it. Just the thought that whatever is waking up there and waiting for them is so huge and so big that he doesn't, although he would be right at this point, but he doesn't even take into consideration that Londo would have had anything to do with them. Because, this conflict is so ancient and big and old. And I think also this would be such a worst-case scenario that they'd already gotten to one of them, that he doesn't dare to take that into consideration. That is what I found very, very interesting to see. And also, of course, sheds a lot more light on whatever deals Londo is getting into. Maybe we can talk about that for a second.
I mean, to stick with Jakar for a brief moment, I think, we can see his thought process there in real time, and it ends on this note, it's all too late anyway. And I think this is kind of where he ends up with, where he has to decide, I'm not going to confront Londo about any of this. I'm not even going to consider this, because if that's true, it's all kind of pointless anyway. So I have to sort of accept the situation as is and try to move forward. And in his last scene with Nathoth, I feel like he has found a little bit of a conclusion there, where he says, okay, things are really, really bad and they are going to change. It's not like it was anymore, but this is kind of what we Narn always strived for or always excelled at, because we were always put into this like worst possible place in history. And so I think he goes like through a little arc in this episode, which is really nice to see, and it speaks also to the strength of his character, that he doesn't get as petulant as Londo does in the beginning of the episode, in just like complaining how nothing is working as it should. But let's talk about Londo's deals here.
Yes, it's a scene that I have been dreading right from the start of this rewatch, because I'm not sure yet how I take it, how I see it, but when he talks to Mr. Martin again, that you have already we learned the way Mr. Martin sticks to his promises and fills your wishes, however serious you were. And Londo suggests, why don't you take out the whole Narn home world? That's just where we also can debate again how honest that was, or if that really was again a kind of telepathic that Mr. Martin can play on him. We can talk about that later, I think. But yeah, a part of me wants to think it's a miscalculation because Londo does not think that could truly happen. Another part of me thinks that would be stupid after what Londo knows so far and what we've seen so far. Yeah, it's a moment that I've been dreading right from the start of this rewatch. Always when he says the sentence of, why not destroy the whole non-home world, or something in the line of that. That is, I think in the moment where he says that, you have this idea that he's going to regret that. You can question whether that is a serious wish or whether he does not want it to become true after all. And you also know that he's talking to someone who, from all that we've known so far, is able to make that come true. So that is a moment that actually can make me shudder a lot. And I think of how that actually works, how Mr. Morton works for him there, if he is using some kind of supernatural abilities, as we've already discussed as an option in season 1 or not, is all very interesting. But there you definitely see how one side and Londo kind of takes over and sets the path for our next possible disaster. So it's a very, very intense moment for me always to watch, I think.
I think for me this is an extremely interesting scene because on one hand Londo feels extremely out of his depth here, and I think there is the possibility that this is a miscalculation, but at the same time there are glimpses where I think we see Londo becoming a lot smarter about how he deals with Mr. Morton, and he's kind of testing out the waters. And I think suggesting the homeworld in this context of the conversation they have in the garden there feels to me almost like he is positing the homeworld as sort of this ludicrous extreme, and is then very taken aback when Mr. Morton doesn't pick it up as that at all and just treats it as a perfectly reasonable other possibility that just should wait a little bit longer. The entire discussion that they have starts, of course, with talking about Quadrant 37, which was completely destroyed. And the first thing Londo is concerned about, or they talk about, is, will this be traceable to me? Which I think kind of sets the tone of first priority is self-preservation. Second priority is how far can I go with this? And I almost feel like the homeworld suggestion is in that context, because Londo is sort of concerned about the fact, I did this great thing, everybody back home praises me for it, but what if they ask me to do it again? Like, it's great that my standing at the court is rising now, but what if I need to do this again? And Mr. Morton is like, well, then we provide it again. And it's almost like Londo is asking, okay, well, how far can I take this? How far can I get in my position from this? Can I just win the war for us? And Mr. Morton is like, yeah, sure. At some point you probably can. And from that moment forward, I feel like Londo gets a lot more careful and a lot more aware in what he's being told and what he's asking. Does that sort of fit in, or?
Yes, it fits in, but it also kind of feels like that comes a bit late.
I don't know. I mean, how many interactions with Mr. Morton did Londo really have at this point, right? He had one in the very beginning where it was just proven to him that Mr. Morton can deliver on any kind of promise with the eye. And then he had one chance of testing out, and with Quadrant 37, he was just made aware how extreme the solution that Mr. Morton is offering really is. So I guess it's a little bit late. He already made a pact with the devil, but I don't think it reflects too poorly on Londo's character in terms of how clever he is when it comes to politicking. I think he catches on fairly quickly here.
Yes, that's true. But I mean, yeah, for the next steps of the story, he's already very deep in.
Absolutely. I think it's very much also him developing this awareness. It's this awareness that I am in this pact. He is under no illusions that he can just back out of it. He's now just testing what is my position in this. And there is a small glimmer when he learns what the price is going to be, right? Where Mr. Morton is like, oh, I have one favor to ask you here, important things. If there's anything on the rim, let us know. And later on, when Londo then reports on something on the rim and the name Zahadum is mentioned, and it felt to me like like Londo immediately caught on to the fact this is a very important world. And when Mr. Morgan tells me he only knows this name in passing, I know it's basically the homeworld of whoever I'm working with. And there I felt, this is smart Londo coming out. This is Londo who now understands, okay, these people are serious business on a galactic, planet-conquering scale. I need to pay attention to stuff like this.
Yes. I also wondered, while we're at that and while we're at the name, Londo seems to only make the connection because of his interactions with Mr. Martin that someone very powerful is based there.
Yes.
The name and everything that Jakar tells him doesn't seem to ring much more of a bell. So I wonder even more how the council meeting would have ended if Mambario, especially Dalen, would have been present. Because I was just thinking about a spoiler-free way to phrase what I want to say. They do seem to have a lot of these mythical, deep, ancient knowledge about the universe, and from what I know from later on, I would have definitely expected her to recognize what he's talking about, to recognize what is going on. And it's interesting that this does not seem to be the case with the Centauri at all. Like, this does not seem to be preserved there in any way that people can just, on a general, normal basis, access the knowledge and work with it. It doesn't seem to matter there at all.
And I think this might also have a lot to do with how the Centauri deal with that kind of stuff, right? The Minbari are all about preserving that ancient knowledge in prophecies and their religious cast and so on. And with the Centauri, we already learned they encountered a legitimately extremely dangerous creature in one of their sectors, and then the quarantine got lifted like 100 years later because some bureaucratic clerk just didn't think it was worth renewing, and then they have suddenly a Nakaling feeder on the station, right? So it seems like in the Centauri Republic, they are a lot more lax about this stuff. And this might even be down to the fact that culturally for them, the gods and like mythical people are just elevated emperors and that kind of stuff. So for them, it's a much more mundane, demystified universe. So they might disregard stuff like this a lot more easily. Even though I would suspect the name Zahadum and the fact that there's dead worlds on the rim is just common knowledge that they also share. They probably just think, the small, superstitious, primitive barbarian races put any kind of belief in that sort of stuff. We are enlightened. We don't care about that kind of thing. Okay. I mean, this kind of takes us through all the council scenes that we have, and we already mentioned Sheridan is mostly having a headache throughout most of these. Do we want to talk about him next a little bit, or does anything else spring to mind?
No, we can talk about him for now.
Him and his beautiful visitor. And I think I noted the name down. It's Lizzie Sheridan, right? Or just Lizzie, his younger sister.
Yes. I mean, it's interesting that we here get to learn a lot more about him and his private life. I think we never had this level of personal interactions with Sinclair.
No. Sinclair didn't really seem to have a lot of family life going on outside of his, crew circle.
Yeah.
Maybe we can just start with our own expectations. At the end of last episode, I asked both Meike and you, what do you think we need to learn about this character? What are the things that really interest us? And more about his personal life really didn't come up in the discussion at all. Like, I don't think anybody had much expectation to learn much about this, because this was something that came much later with Sinclair. But no, this episode very much focuses on the fact that Sheridan has a past, and that past involves a tragic death, and that past involves a family that is still around, that still cares about him, and that scolds him for not taking care of his own grieving process. All of which are story beats that we kind of already saw in parts either with Ivanova or with Sinclair in season 1. We are kind of brushing through these very quickly here, but it just fleshes out this character very much in a way that I think we didn't really expect for the commander of the station to have this sort of big element to it. But I have to say, I kind of like it. I always appreciate a functional family dynamic in science fiction, especially because that's not something we usually get to see. So his sister visiting to check in on him feels nice.
Yes, you definitely then don't have this problem of this hero figure that cannot have a personal life, because otherwise there would be so much more conflict.
And I think it also rounds out his character a little bit, because especially in the first episode, he's a big smiley guy. He's always in a fairly good mood, it seems, and giving him sort of the dimension that this isn't necessarily a very healthy thing, that his complete focus on work and work only might have some implications. I think it's just very nice to see.
Yes. Maybe on a side note, I mean, his wife was an archaeologist, right?
Yes.
So once again, we have an interesting archaeology life, although that's not an active thing anymore in that case, but still. Just that I find it interesting how dangerous and adventurous the job of an archaeologist is in that universe, actually. I mean, I know we talked about that a lot in season 1 already, but it doesn't stop. It just keeps being relevant. So, yeah.
It keeps being relevant, both that it's dangerous and that it's something that is much more of a societal effort, I would say. We don't really live in a universe of Babylon 5 where Earth Alliance sends out a big exploration ships where heroic captains get the beautiful task of exploring new worlds and meeting new life. Like Sheridan himself remarks on the fact that if I want to see aliens, I just need to step out of my door on this station, very much implying that if he is on frontier duty with the Agamemnon, 99% of time he sees a bunch of asteroids and ice-cold barren moons. The universe isn't this magical place where you stumble across wonders every other second. So if discoveries are made, it's because there's a bunch of scientists on a bunch of expeditions sponsored by giant corporations that scour the galaxy for important things. And Earth Alliance comes around and collects interesting stuff every now and then, but it's really much more of a societal effort to get anything interesting out of it, which is nice to see. I mean, there's 2 more sides to Sheridan in this episode. We can talk about a little bit how he's handling the command of the station, other than taking on weight because there's better food now. And there is his emotional side, if we want to dig into this a little bit. Which of the 2 do you prefer?
Let's start with the command of the station.
Yeah, it's big. It's much, much bigger than anything he has dealt with. And I think he was already unsure in the end of the last episode, and he really shows in private with Lizzie both his absolute excitement, but also that he's kind of daunted by the tasks that he's presented with, right?
Yes, and I think it was good for the storytelling maybe to have him in this early scenes with someone personally so close to him, that we see him as a commander, we see him with all of these tasks, with all of these dramatic news that he's getting during the day, and then we see him talking to his sister, and you see the excitement, you see the confusion. That's definitely good to get to know the character here. And I think in this season you definitely don't have this idea anymore of Sheridan being cold and calculating and coming from Earth with a kind of agenda. I think the side that I saw in him here is definitely that an agenda, because he was placed here by Earth and he was briefed about certain courses the government wants Earth to take or whatever. You see that is definitely not an active thing he's doing or he's thinking about here.
I think that's very much the case, and in terms of writing this season, it's a good choice to have him visited by somebody that's so familiar, because we already established he has a working relationship with Ivanova, but it would get old if she is the only one he ever confides in, and especially when he's excitedly talking about, I saw Dylan and she has hair now, and it was like she was having a butterfly effect, it was great. That would be kind of inappropriate for him to talk to his immediate colleagues like that. So it's a great way of showcasing a little bit more of his inner worlds to us, and it definitely makes him a lot more sympathetic as well, because we see how much genuine excitement there is for anything that he's doing.
Yes. Yes, others than that, I'll be curious in the next episodes to see him in more active council meetings, to see how that is going, because he's still so new to a lot of the ambassadors. He doesn't know all of their little other fights that they've had in season 1. So at this point, we definitely are in advantage of Sheridan on that account. because we have seen all of these little, sometimes curious, sometimes funny, sometimes crazy things that Sinclair always had to deal with. And now the basic atmosphere in the world is a lot more serious. So I would have this idea as a first-time viewer that the council meetings are going to have more substance and are going to be more and more dramatic. So I definitely would like to see more of that, because he definitely has shown to be a more active, more energy-driven, more explosive character.
Yes, I imagine that he would immediately make Earth Alliance itself also a much more active participant. I think he would be much more comfortable leveraging Earth Alliance as a part of these discussions and sort of telling, sitting down Londo and Sheridan saying, you work this out now, otherwise just we are going to send the cruisers and take the sector from you, and then that's going to be a different crisis. I feel like that's definitely possible. And you mentioned him like interacting with the ambassadors again. This episode just hammered home for me the point that Sinclair really misses out on a bunch of key factors. He never knows G'Kar as the mustache-twirling villain. He doesn't see that. He never learns about Delenn as a pure Minbari. He always sees them already in the second stage of their characters. And
you mean Sheridan?
Yes.
You just said Sinclair.
I will throw these together a bunch of times. People are used to that, unfortunately. We can always blame JMS for giving both main characters his own initials. Like the names sound similar, so that's just going to happen. No, but the point being that, like you say, we have a little bit of an advantage over him, and it's going to be interesting to see his judgment calls later on. If we see more of these meetings, how much he maybe has to learn from them before he is up to speed properly. Of course, all of this is fine and good, but Lizzie really pushes towards the more emotional side of things because she thinks...
Before we go there,
yes,
can we talk about the call from the president?
Oh, of course.
I think we missed that, and I think that's interesting because suddenly we have a president who shows his face.
Yeah, but only his face, very distinctly. Yeah, I had this call noted down, but as part of the Garibaldi plot, so we can circle back to those things. But yeah, we already learned in the last episode, Sheridan has a direct line to the president, and that seems to be a vocal thing, which I could never imagine with Sinclair, simply because nobody liked Sinclair back home.
And also, I think he has a direct line to the president. Mm-hmm. And he has a lot more connection to Earth in general. I mean, with Sinclair, we did not have such a personal connection to Earth as a place. And he has his family that is still active. He has a sister who lives on Earth, right?
As far as I know.
As far as I remember as well. And he has a line to the president. So here we have a commander for the station who has been sent from Earth and is here still in close contact and close touch with Earth. And that is very new, I think, that we see how much traffic, how much information is coming back and forth, how connected these places are for now. Yeah.
And I think it gives us also a nice showcase of said president, which we already have learned indirectly about. So maybe we can talk quickly about our impression of President Clark now, because... I think he's quite striking in the few lines that he gets where he has very good reasons for anything that he says and anything that he demands, and still, just like Sheridan, you can't help but feel very uneasy about all of these things because they just so conveniently fall together.
Yes, and I think it was also kind of relieving to see Sheridan feeling uncomfortable, to see that whatever big plan could be in motion, he's not part of it.
Yeah.
Because, you could doubt that with all of the connections to Earth at this point.
And I mean, we see this in Sheridan's reaction, but also the very clear delineation that the president's high priority seems to be taking things out of Sheridan's hands. So Sheridan might be favored in some way of getting assigned to this post, but he's definitely not part of any kind of inner circle where sensitive information would be shared.
The first thing about the call of the president is that the president spoke in a manner that always annoys me, not that I want to insult anyone. Annoying is the wrong word, but he had a strong melody in his very, very American English.
That I find it interesting how he has very good reasons for why Jack should be sent directly to Earth, and how he has a responsibility to the legacy of Santiago and all that, which to me speaks to the fact that all of this is still part of some kind of plan. And it was always assumed that there is this possibility that people get caught and you have an easy out prepared for them. And this is what I assume happens throughout this show. So that he is very much in a position where, as president, he just will have good answers to any kind of accusation and question you can throw at him. And I think this is also why it will be extremely difficult. It will be a complete uphill battle for, well, in this case, Garibaldi specifically, to prove anything here. Because now that the plan has gone through as was the intention, it's going to be very difficult to dislodge the kind of alternate truth that Clark has established.
Yes. So now we're in the Garibaldi plot.
We should circle back to the emotional element of Sheridan before we go into Garibaldi outright.
Not yet the emotional, we are still on the command
level. Yeah.
Level, yes. I think what really, really was also important to see here as a viewer who gets to know Sheridan is his disappointment when Ivanova tells him that the ship with the suspect is gone.
Yeah.
That was important to see, to actually see he is not part of a big plan, that's emotion, and also he is really, really fully, authentically behind his position as commander, and this really, really gets to him.
I think it's well, on one side is loyalty. I think that is a reason for his disappointment here, but I think it also speaks to the fact that he doesn't like things going wrong, period, and is probably used to an environment that is much more contained and much easier to control. I think there is this sting for him that why didn't anybody catch this? Why didn't anybody inform me when this odd extra ship was going up? And he's right not to put any blame on anyone immediately, because that was just a plan that I don't think they could have had a good chance at preventing. But it is just this realization: I am in control of a station that is orders of magnitude bigger than my own ship. On my own ship, I could know everyone very personally. I could know all the systems, know all the procedures properly. Here, I'm out of my depth, and so it is much easier for people to do stuff right under my nose. And I think that is just something that takes some getting used to, and that is going to be different in this commands that he will have to kind of find ways of reckoning with. Yeah.
Yes.
Now the emotional side. Because all of this is fine and good, but his sister is very much here to check in on him because, well, as we learn, it's been 2 years since his wife died, and he is not fine. He is definitely not fine. We already had this discussion kind of with Ivanova in season 1, where her father dies, and she is very much in this mode of, I'm not going to show my grief in a conventional way. I'm going to live my own life and deal with things that way. And there it was very debatable how justified the rabbi was in meddling and how much this is just her own way of dealing with things. With Sheridan, it feels very much like he is aware that what he's doing is not healthy, and he appreciates that somebody comes in to check and help, but he also still has difficulties finding time for that. And I very much appreciate this fact that they at some point decide, let's table this discussion. I just want to have a not so meaningful conversation before we go into this. But then he also opens up on his own later on and says, okay, now is the time, we are in my quarters. Let's talk about the difficult subject. So that is just a nice setup, I think, for his entire issue that is then unraveled. It's this whole idea that he has not dealt with the grief, and I think the dialogue that he has to showcase this, I see something interesting on the news, and then I think about telling her and just remember from the beginning again that she's not there and why. that I found very compelling. I think it's a very nice description without getting like melodramatic about the grief or anything. It's the mundanity of this that I think makes it very believable to me, both in the way that it's not come up to this point, but at the same time also that's a very real thing. And we learn a little bit about why he has such difficulty closing, like finding any kind of closure with his feelings. It's because he has this sense of guilt, both about her taking on the mission where she died because of their last interaction, because he had no time set aside or couldn't set time aside. And then, of course, the even smaller, more mundane thing, didn't say, I love you to her in this last conversation, which is absolutely, I think, something that happens, that people deal with. And I like that it is handled in a way where it is this kind of small thing. It's silly that he would have this massive guilt built up around that. And that is very much acknowledged by his sister, but also in a way that is not insulting his emotions. It's not like pointing at it saying, you should just get over yourself. It's more like, yeah, these are feelings that we have. We just have to learn to live with them in a way. And ultimately, she has a nice help and a nice aid for him to do this. But at the same time, also very much gives him this space and says, I'm in my quarters if you need me, but, this is your process to go through.
Yes, and we see that he carries this emotional baggage, and now he is on the station, and he is so much involved in so much bigger things and in so much challenging things. So I think it's also very good to see that his sister is finally able to give him some closure, because his guilt for not having the time to see his wife for the very last time is kind of minimized a little bit, because she also would have had to cancel because of her very interesting new project. So we see that this is still there, but he now gets a little bit of information that makes it easier, which in the end is good to take on all the new tasks that are waiting for him.
I wonder how to sort of view that, because it's definitely one valid way of saying his guilt kind of gets minimized by giving him this reasoning that it wouldn't have worked out anyway. I also feel like there is an element of just showcasing him that having this guilt in the first place is kind of silly, because everyone has these things, like
maybe a reminder of that. Maybe a reminder of, she also had her own life. She had her own priorities. Yeah, she also was away most of the time. It was not like she was sitting at home waiting for him. A reminder of that probably, yeah.
I think it's just this thing which prevents him from building up this image of her, being severely disappointed and like dwelling on these things, because the reality is, of course, he had 2 years in grief dwelling on these things and making these so much more tragic than they really are. So this in combination, I think, is a really nice way of finding closure for this. And yeah, I don't think it's a coincidence that his sister shows up now and does this. She probably knows this is a switch in command, to command into a role where he will not have as easy an excuse of saying, I'm on my ship and got assigned somewhere else. I have no time to deal with my grief right now. Like, now she knows he's going to have to stay in a place. He's going to have to delegate more. Now is the best opportunity, but also the highest necessity of giving him that room to approach these new challenges. Mm-hmm.
Maybe now let's start with the Garibaldi plot.
Yes, let's start with the Garibaldi plot, which starts with him in a coma. And before Garibaldi really plays into this, we learn yet another thing about Sinclair. No, not about Sinclair, about Sheridan, which is his relationship with Dr. Franklin. And he immediately sees Dr. Franklin is a workaholic that will try anything and everything to prevent anyone helping him. And so in the aftermath of confronting the death of his wife again and such, Sheridan makes this decision, I need to go down there and convince Franklin somehow to share this burden. And he is successful in that, which I think is good, because it shows us Sheridan has this awareness and has ways of dealing with somebody like Franklin, which is, not the easiest thing to do. How do you feel about the solution to Garibaldi's coma?
I mean, I wasn't there when you discussed the episode where this machine was introduced. So maybe I can also say a word on that. I didn't have much to say to that episode, so it was okay that I was knocked out for that day. But when I watched that episode for the first time, I was always very disappointed that this machine actually worked, actually did something that was helpful, because I felt like this narrative of I am scared of real doctors, or I cannot afford real doctors, and then I go to this wonder healer in a very mysterious street somewhere and get this illegal treatment that no one actually knows how it works, but I feel like it makes me feel better. Like, I don't know. I think it would have been a stronger point if it would actually not happen at all and would just have been placebo, because that's how these wonder healers usually work, I think. Either it's placebo or it's making things worse. So that's just a side note on that episode. So I don't really know what to say to that solution. I think it would have been better if he would have just woken up naturally. Like, I don't know why we dug up this machine that I've had such a problem with in the first place. What was your question?
No, I mean, it makes a bunch of sense. I think you are very much evaluating this machine in a sort of framework of the story that could be told with it, right? Yes. And with it not living up to that, of course, that makes it problematic being brought up here again. I think in the most simplest level, there is, of course, the satisfaction for me of, hey, we have this wonder machine and it gets brought back up. So that's good. It wasn't forgotten. It's just a show reminding us that these elements from even episodic stories can come back if it's necessary. And I mean, there is this element of showcasing this was a very serious situation and it would have killed Garibaldi otherwise. I guess to just add more weight to the finale of season 1, this might be something. But on the other hand, if it's just a callback for a callback's sake, there's this question if that was very necessary. I think it would have still worked without it. Regardless, what it does create is a very nice little conundrum where, Dr. Franklin has this chance to use the wonder healing machine on his own with no supervision, which is a terrible idea, and Sheridan calls him out on that. So this is nice. But then we also move on from this fairly quickly, and the next big important milestone is Garibaldi's rude awakening. And it's basically, you've been in a coma for 2 weeks, so that's terrible news. Then the president is dead, so that's also terrible news. The commander that you want to talk to is not there anymore, so that's terrible news. I don't blame Garibaldi for just looking at Sheridan and being like, I don't know you, and that is not helpful right now. I'm not in a position to welcome you to your new command. And I think that's good. I think it's also good that there's not this immediate bonding moment of, oh my God, you sacrificed some of your time and life force to save me or something like that. This is a great gesture that Sheridan does, but for Garibaldi, it's much more the looming identity crisis of what just happened.
Yes. That's definitely also, I think, as a viewer, an interesting callback on look how many changes there were, because Garibaldi definitely passed out before all of the big changes happened, really. And it's a whole new world that he wakes up to, definitely. I have to admit that I was a bit surprised on how Ivanova just blurted out, no, sorry, the president's dead. I was like, should we not, maybe, I don't know, wait a little bit?
She is a very direct, pragmatic person, and that is not always a benefit.
But, we saw Talia again. Maybe that's also an interesting note, because we have not seen her in a while.
I'm glad that very much at the beginning of this season she's brought back, just to show the highlight, hey, she's still around and she's important. And I think it speaks books about the Garibaldi's character, that his first priority is finding out what happened and who is responsible. He seems extremely bothered by the fact that he can't tell them straight away who did this to him. And bringing in Talia as a solution to this makes a lot of sense to me. And I think she immediately tells him this is not going to be admissible at court. So Garibaldi doesn't care about that. He doesn't care about the official judicial system dealing with the situation. This is an extremely personal case for him.
Yes. Yeah, because as we discussed while we watched Chrysalis, to do his job, he just has to trust a small group of people, but he has to trust someone or he's not able to do his job. So this hurts a lot to find out who was the one who betrayed you, definitely.
Yes, and I mean, we see this in his way of finding out that it was his second-in-command, Jack, and we see this also in his absolute desire to interrogate Jack. And once again, I am under no illusions that Garibaldi thinks this is going to be a big confession that he gets where he somehow gets this guy behind bars. I think it's much more this personal element. Now I need to look this guy in the eye and I need to confront him about this and get anything out of him, which I think the interrogation scene that we get out of this is ultimately fairly powerful, where Garibaldi just powers through this.
Yes. In the first season, when he woke up and when people asked him, do you remember who shot you? I wasn't sure if he was actually not able to remember who shot him, or if he remembered who shot him and realized, oh, the person is around and therefore shut up. But then later we found out that he really did not remember. But at first I really thought he could be that aware to not tell it in that moment. So that was an interesting guess that we had there. Because, I'm just saying this because, he wakes up and as soon as he's awake, he's fully there again with all of his strength, with all of his tactical thinking. It's like he wasn't knocked out for 2 weeks, definitely. And I think we also can make the connection here that Clark doesn't want to take action, although the witness is missing. So that is very, very suspicious. But we don't get any more proof how that belongs together in this episode.
No.
But things don't look good. That's for sure.
We could talk for a moment about how Jack ends up arrested, because I think this is the one silver lining that Garibaldi gets in this episode, where this police crew is extremely eager to get the traitor out of their midst, and very openly offers to just kind of extrajudicially torture and kill the guy if necessary, which on the one hand for Garibaldi is great because it shows if he's not confronted with somebody like Jack who is just lying his way through to get his trust, Garibaldi is legitimately good at creating a team that fosters a lot of intense loyalty to him personally. But it kind of, the show goes out of its way to immediately showcase why that isn't necessarily a good thing, because as much as we root against Jack in this episode, that offer that Lou Welch makes of take a walk around the block and we deal with this guy is not something that should be possible. It's very much a problem. And honestly, as much as we praise Sheridan, I don't know if he should be as chill about that. That seems like something he should address as a problem with security culture on Babylon 5.
That seems like it, yes, but also the recent events may have shown that they live in a broader system where this is necessary.
That is very possible.
So that could definitely be a kind of inner conflict of I should say something, but we saw that we need this, so that's it.
Let me check my notes on that, but I think I agree.
I think it leaves us with this bitter aftertaste of now he is awake, now we have his word on what he saw, what he found out, but it's just too late. The things are in motion, the changes have happened, and the witness gets mysteriously sneaked away from us. So, in the end, we are left empty-handed.
The moral of the entire story for Garibaldi here is, right, he can't pick things up where they left off. And that is very much true for the show in general. Like, things are at a different scale now. If we look at the general threat that Jakar is uncovering, that is a big thing for him, that I can't just go back to bickering with Londo. I need to address the bigger issue in the room. and that's the case with the entire presidential assassination. And there is no easy guidebook on how to move forward. There are no immediate steps, so it leaves our characters, I think, at the end of this episode in a very, very reactive position where they kind of have to wait for things to develop, and things aren't going to develop in a positive direction. So I think this general sense of uneasy is very fitting to the season title, The Coming of Shadows. I think we hit on all the major points that I had noted down. So we could move over towards the tapestry, I think.
We can do that.
All right, then we swiftly move to our final 2 segments now, because we've expanded things for season 2. The tapestry. As usual, we want to pull on the threads that hold Babylon 5 together. And in this season, we have opted to try out a new way of visualizing that. And I have this way actually prepared right here, where we have the roster of the entire season. And I just start filling out these with the thumbnails of everything that happens in these episodes. And we noted down for the points of departure, the first season episode, that there are 2 main things that we want to learn about. One is the Minbari mystery, and we don't really learn anything about that here. It's only about Delenn, and the Minbari War doesn't really play a role in any of this. And about Sheridan. We wanted to learn about Sheridan's loyalties. I think we already talked about the fact that it seems very much like his loyalty is alive with Babylon 5 for now, and with Earth Alliance at large, but not particularly with the new president, which he is more guarded against, and notably the president is also more guarded against him. When it comes to diplomacy, I don't think he had much chance to interact with the characters. Here, Meike especially was curious about how he's going to interact with different ambassadors and such, and so far he has just been moderating screaming matches, so there's not much there. So we can now start talking or thinking about what of the core elements of this episode are things that we want to learn more about that might carry forward or belong to longer running threads throughout the show.
I would say that we definitely stay worried about what is happening to Earth, what is happening on Earth and Earth politics. Nothing good ever comes from that. So far,
we learned that there's a new order coming, right?
Yeah,
so that's
always worrisome.
Absolutely.
The other thing is what is happening out on the rim, and what are these cryptic messages that Jakar is now throwing around actually meaning?
Yes, especially if they are connected to old things. Like he lays this out, there was only the option of being a new race or a very old one. And if it's a very old one, that immediately raises the question, okay, where have they been? If they were sleeping for the past 1,000 years, why? So that's a whole different kind of can of worms. And I think this is the main thread that I think we see here. It's this, things are happening on the rim. The only connection that I would draw beyond that is the whole Londo side of things, where we not only have the awareness in general that something is going on the rims, but also Londo's special little case where he starts piecing together that what is happening at Zahadum and his new friend Mr. Morden are somehow connected. And that awareness will be important if he wants to navigate the situation. I think this is decent enough to fill out our tapestry chart for this episode. We will definitely move on with this, especially when Meike is here to start, seeing how these threads thread everything together. For our last big important segment, our Interstellar Earth Alliance post box, we always take a look at some of the comments. This is probably going to be shorter today because usually the point of the post box is that all 3 of us get to answer questions that are posed to us. So if only we 2 are here, that kind of defeats the purpose. But there's still 1 or 2 comments that I would like to take on from the last episode that we released literally just yesterday ago, and already there's a handful of comments there, which is very nice to see. We had 1 comment from Coffee Cat on the whole what would have happened if Sinclair had been here, and what I think was the general consensus in the community that we've seen so far. If Sinclair was in charge of the station, probably the Trigati wouldn't have come here, which I think we can agree on. I would have liked to see the standoff between the Dragati and the Agamemnon if they would still go after Starkiller. Who knows how that would have turned out without having to protect a bunch of civilians. Maybe Sheridan would have been happier to actually engage in a combat. Who knows? So that is definitely the case. And this comment goes on to say that they have come to like Sheridan, especially through his interactions with Ivanova and how much he learns to lean on her and his crew. And I think that's a very good point to take. With Sinclair, we kind of pointed out on several occasions that he doesn't call his security chief when he probably should, that he wants to jump into the cockpit immediately. Sheridan seems to be much better with that. He seems much better at relying on his crew. What I will say is I believe that this is also where his greatest weakness lies, because his reliance on the crew is very much from this smaller ship-based context. I don't know how well he will handle this if he has for example, this massive security department to lean on, and if things don't go smoothly there's not really a way for him to micromanage his way out of this. So that's going to be something to take on. Texas Undershock has commented a few times on our videos and answered to this comment that they also believe that Sheridan was the perfect figurehead. And that is just important to me because if we think about the interactions that Sheridan has with Clark, and we pointed out today that he seems not to be in the inner circle with Clark, why is he there then, right? Why was he chosen? And I think this might be hitting the nail on the head right there. He's a great figurehead. Even if whatever people of the New Order, if Clark is even connected to that, but if whoever is getting more powerful in Earth Force wants to have him for any reason, it will be very much this symbolic one of him being the Starkiller. So that's something to keep in mind, something that he might even be able to utilize later on. Oh yeah, this is one that I wanted to ask you about, because we didn't talk about the Minbari mystery in this episode. It doesn't play as much of a role, but our long-time commenter, Ara Klaus 3, mentioned this fact that we know the Minbari don't fight very many wars. And in the last episode, we talked a little bit about the fact that the Minbari have this massive military, and what is its purpose if it's not fighting wars? So I'm just curious what you think, or what your assumptions, theories would be, how the warrior caste copes with that. In the comment, the idea is that maybe there is some sort of ritual combat happening, maybe their equivalent of martial arts, maybe meditation. Would this be enough, or do we have a very war-hungry group of people now on our hands?
I don't know. I mean, I would in general say that people who were folks, nations, so here's the word. Nations that have a very huge military don't necessarily fight a lot of wars. It can have a lot of different functions. So martial arts, meditation and whatever is definitely a part of it. But I think another part of it also is that having a big military and having a military play an important role in a society equips the society with certain values like obedience, things like that, selflessness, hardships, things like that. It's this kind of values that you get from a military perspective on working, on life, on a lot of things. And that these are very strong fundaments of the Minbari society would make sense. So I think that also a lot of addition to what the spiritual caste comes in kind of in the meaning of a mindset can just be executed and shown as example and whatever by the warrior caste, if there is not a war, to keep the society in check on some level.
And that I find very interesting, because it kind of pushes the Minbari in an interesting perspective in terms of what we equate it to. The Minbari very much feel like, the enlightened space elves, but if we talk about the military as a tool for a society to, for example, if there's a general military service that everybody is part of, that's a perfect way for a state to instill certain values into the entire populations. Usually that is mentioned if we talk about the Empire in Star Wars, right? There's this everlasting conundrum. The Empire has this massive military. How did they ever get defeated? And one of the big arguments is always, well, it was a military that wasn't really equipped to fight wars. It was more a tool for the state to ensure loyalty and that kind of thing. And of course, it makes complete sense that this would be something that a very rigid, caste-driven society like the Minbari also do. Still, it doesn't really come to mind that they might be more similar to the Empire from Star Wars than anybody else. So that's just, I really enjoy this as an element, and it makes complete sense. Like, we know that rigid, like, authoritarian structures in their families and clans, and even in the religious caste for the temples, are a thing. So why not have this be one of the key reasons why the warrior caste is around? Okay. I think for today, this does it with our little post box. We will fill in Meike, of course, on everything that we talked about. She already watched the episode as well, so she is not missing out on the episodes that she's not discussing with us. And with a bit of luck, fingers crossed, she will be back with us for the next episode.
I can say something. I already mentioned in this episode another one that I did not discuss, that one with the Wonder Machine. I also missed the episode where Zatros was introduced. And I don't have much left to say to that episode because your discussion was really good. I just want to mention that I love this character and that I missed out picking him in our award show in any kind of sense. So,
Yeah.
I love him. I just so enjoy episodes where him and all of his other little brothers, whatever, play a part. They have a place in my heart. That's just on a side note.
Very, very good Zathar's appreciation thrown in there. It can never be a bad thing. All right, we will be here next week with the Geometry of Shadows, episode 3 of season 2, which brings us the most persistent in-joke of Babylon 5 fandom, which is horrible, green versus purple, but it also gives us technomages, which are a fascinating concept that I'm excited to talk about.
I'm so confused that this is happening so early.
Yes, right?
I thought it must have been much later.
We will spend so much time with the Drazi near the end of the series, so it's going to be fun. But no, it's going to be a great moment for Ivanova to shine, hopefully, and I'm very excited to see what Meike is going to have to say about that one. Maybe it's good that she missed out on this one, because this one involved a lot of kind of sappy relationship stuff. This will be probably more suited to her. I think she might be excited about the technomages and hilarity with Vir and Londo again, so that's a good place for her to start up again. All right. Until then, you can find us, as always, on all the social media platforms. Mastodon is still a thing?
It's still a thing. I don't post much, but it's still a thing.
Wonderful. On all social media platforms at Third Age Podcast. And, of course, this is also how you can find us on Apple TV, not on Apple TV, on Apple Podcasts, on Amazon Music, on Google Podcasts, Spotify, and Anchor, Spotify for podcasters, as the fully audio version, but, of course, here on YouTube.
We're the cutest because here you can see.
Beautiful.